ultimately, I believe, has to do with is an invitation from God for us to do or be something in the world that draws us closer to God and also plunges us deeper into God's work of restoration. It became very clear to this committee that Clark Schelara has a deep and authentic sense of call to serve as advocate for congregations and clergy in this presbytery. An advocate is one who comes alongside, not in front of or behind, but walks alongside in a posture of Christ-like support and encouragement, offering grace in a variety of seasons and situations and lives. Clark, we've discovered, longs for the defining attribute of his ministry to be advocacy. Advocacy for the gospel, for congregations, for people. But it also has been the defining attribute to his ministry in all of his experience as a follower of Christ, as a pastor, as a mission worker, as a peacemaker, as a husband and a father. Clark has a depth and a diversity of experience that has allowed him to meet people where they are in times of transition, in times of celebration, in times of grief, in times of new beginnings. In all of it, though, it is clear that Clark has the skills and the abilities to facilitate meaningful connections, to bridge divides, and to accomplish common goals. William Arthur Ward said, "We can throw stones, complain about them, stumble on them, climb over them, or build with them." We are part of something new and creative being built in and through this presbytery. And today, we are thrilled to present Clark Schelara to you as the person we believe is called to serve as advocate for congregations and clergy in that building process. There is no doubt in our minds that he will come alongside you and your congregations to think creatively about our faith and witness in this time, while leaning into a renewed consideration of how God might be calling us to translate the richness of the gospel to new generations and to new communities and old communities as well. We are grateful and we celebrate this day how the Holy Spirit has aligned Clark with this community of the Presbytery of the Cascades as part of God's ongoing work of restoration in this time and place. Thank you.
I'm Lisa Snotterly, ruling elder from First Presbyterian Church, downtown Portland. I've had the pleasure to serve in several capacities leading up to this day, and I'm going to be talking about the sheet of paper with the dots on it, the green and yellow dots. As we began our search, as we begin any search, you have to know what you're searching for. And all of you in this room are familiar with the process, but I think I have to go back a little bit. So the top section of the dotted form are actually the qualities that the transition team brainstormed back in August of 2016. We spent time discerning what we felt God was calling for this presbytery for both the position that Brian is in and the position we're presenting a candidate to you today to fill. These qualities are taken right off the whiteboard. There's no, none of my words, none of our process. This is exactly what the transition team had on the whiteboard. And the green asterisks are things that we felt we either saw in Clark or learned about in his presentations to us and his time with us. So the match to those qualities was really, really evident to us. We're very excited about that. The second part of that same sheet of paper are the 10 qualities that we submitted when we submitted the ministry information form. And as many of you or all of you know, there's probably never a search where every single, selection is a match, or at least I'm not familiar with one. But we wanted to just let you know where we felt Clark's skills and abilities matched with those 10 qualities or competencies that we led this search to find. And I think that's really all I want to say. The next order of business is to invite Clark. Yes. So it's my pleasure to invite Clark Schelara up to speak.
You need that? Is that all right?
I might just move it just to the side. There. All right. Well, good morning.
Morning.
I am so grateful to be here with you all this morning. And I want to keep my comments brief because I'm cognizant of the fact that people were here late last night and there's a chance we could be here for a good while this morning. So mostly I wanted to take a chance to express my gratitude to the search team for their diligent process, to this Presbytery for the ways that it has waded into complex issues, but done so in a respectful manner, in a manner in which we can learn and grow and move forward in positive directions. I myself, throughout this process and throughout observing the Presbytery, have again and again felt a sense of affirmation that this is a place that feels like God's call in my life at this time. My wife and I were serving a church in South Carolina and sort of stepped out in faith due to a number of family issues and a growing family and a desire to be closer to my wife's extended family for additional support. And so we sold our house and packed up and moved west and settled in Canby, Oregon. And this position had not even entered into the CLC, unaware of it. And so in a way we felt like we were had a kinship with Abraham and Sarah, setting off to a land in which we know not. And I think for most of us, we long for the call process to be a little more clear, a nice stepping stone from one position to the next, where there's not an extended period of unemployment. But for my wife and I, we had a distinct sense that God was calling us to something new, something different, something that was not known. And so we stepped forward in faith. And when I opened the CLC several weeks into settling here in Oregon, this position absolutely jumped off the page for me in a frightening way, in a wonderful way. And so through that process, that is what has brought me here to stand before you. A real sense of connection to the position. If you look through my bio, you'll see I have sort of an eclectic background in ministry. I very much feel committed to the church, feel committed to being a minister, feel very pastoral, and at the same time, I have never found myself drawn to those more traditional patterns of ministry, those positions that I have received so much from and that I believe so much in, but I've always found myself in these alternate ways of living out ministry. And so this position really rose up again as one of those opportunities to serve the church, to more importantly serve Christ through the church, and to do that in new patterns, new ways of connecting people, new ways of caring for people, ways that are not necessarily mapped out for us, but that ways that require connection to one another, ways that require a careful, attentive listening to what God might be doing and what God might be doing that is new within our communities. So it is with great hope and with great faith that I come before you this morning, optimistic about the good work that we can do together, the ways that we can build community, the ways that we can be drawn together to make our churches and communities more hospitable, more engaging, more open to the diversity that I think God intends for the faithful Christian community. And so I think I'm going to stop there because I imagine we'll all be better served if I'm steered by your questions. So I'm not sure if I stay
Sure.
for questions or...
Yeah, you can stay up here.
Okay.
And since you're completed with your opening statement, we thank you for being here. Now, if anyone in the congregation has a question for Clark, please come to one of the microphones. When I call on you, please state your name, whether you're a ruling elder or from a particular church or committee, or a minister member of the Presbytery. And last night I directed you to speak directly to the moderator. Today it would be appropriate to address your questions directly to Clark. So.
Thank you. Clark, my name is June Carlson,
June.
and please don't do that. I'm a ruling elder from Southminster Presbyterian Church in Beaverton. Recently was moderator, and now I'm chair of the Leadership Commission, Presbytery Leadership Commission. So I'm sure you're aware of all the conversation we've had about diversity leading us to this meeting. Pretty painful conversations, actually, and there's a lot of heart and soul that have gone into them. And I'm curious, my question is, how do we white people encourage diversity and understand that better decisions get made with more voices and more different voices? And I'll leave it at that. So.
June, thank you. That is a wonderful question. And I think it's a question that we need to live into, for lack of a better way of describing it. I think we would all long to have the magic answer where we could just do one thing and suddenly we would have a diverse community that we long to have and that we theologically believe is the core of the Christian community present right here within our presbytery. But I think it is something that needs to be built very intentionally and cultivated over time. And I'm also aware that our Presbyterian polity is very much ground up and not top down. And so I think a lot of the work is going to need to happen within the context of congregations. The primary forward-facing nature of our church is our congregations, the people that fill the pews, the pastors, the elders, the people that open the doors on Sunday morning. And so I think what I would long to do is to work with our churches to figure out how we can be good neighbors in our communities. How can we better learn the needs of our communities in their full diversity, and then help the fullness of those communities, the people that make them up, how can we help them feel not only welcome in our churches, but also like our church has something to offer them, that our church has advocated for them and come alongside them. And so I think a lot of the work is yet to be done. It needs to be lived into, and definitely on a congregational basis. And that's something I'm excited about, working with people to figure out how we can do that more fully and more faithfully.
Clark, I'm Jeff Sievert, pastor at the Reedville Church in the Portland metro area. Pregnancy is a word with resonance in this process. Not only are you and your wife experiencing it firsthand and literally, this presbytery is experiencing it as we ache toward what is next, as we groan in labor pains. To be a new presbytery and a new church in a new time in this region that can be so challenging in a variety of ways. And so I have two questions. One, how do you see this moment of pregnancy in the life of the church and your place in that moment of pregnancy? And number two, and not unrelated, is this position has been described as one discharged out of the trunk of one's car. I'm wondering if you and your family have talked about the fact that you will never see them again, and how that might be fit into your sense of the position.
Oh, thank you. These are fun questions. I think to first start with the analogy of pregnancy, and one of the things about pregnancy is it is a season full of hope but also full of anxiety and uncertainty, because you don't know that everything is going to go cleanly or smoothly or have the result that you hope, which is, of course, a healthy, beautiful new life to nurture and to care for, and to eventually set free upon its own journey. You don't know that those things are not guarantees. And so I think in a similar fashion in this presbytery, there are a lot of wonderful, faithful people that have come together to envision a new thing. And it is not certain. It is not a done process. It is not something that happens in one moment and then it's heading off to college, right? It is something that we are in the throes of labor. And so I am not scared that there is conflict. I think that is a very healthy and important and smart thing for the presbytery to be doing as it considers a new way of posturing itself in this world and living out ministry. And we don't know that the outcome will be that happy, healthy, growing baby. But we have hope. We have hope that it has the potential to be that, and that with birth comes a lot of responsibility and additional effort and additional care, not a job well done and you go home and take a nap now. No, it's stay up all night and feed the baby now. So, I think this really becomes a season where we all need to celebrate the joy and the gift of new life, and also commit to the loving intention of parenting a new life up until it is standing on its own two legs. So I think it's a beautiful, apt analogy for the time that we're in. In terms of my my own family, I do have the luck of having a very outspoken wife who will not tolerate me being gone for too long. So she will help keep me honest and make sure I have a good work and life balance. And additionally, we each have a real sincere love of traveling, of meeting new people, of engaging in different areas. And I could very well see us taking family trips to different areas where of course they could do some fun exploration, and I could do some hard work and some meetings, but we could do some of those things as a family. We are both ordained clergy and have a sense of the church. Our jobs are indeed jobs, and they're also vocational callings that involve something from our whole family, and hopefully are an outgrowth of who we are as a couple. And so we are hopeful that we can strike that work-life balance and stay first and foremost a family, and then also doing the good work laid out before us. Thank you.
At the back.
Hi, Clark. I am John Ailstock, Stated Supply in Grants Pass. I am from Charleston, South Carolina, lived on Sullivan's Island.
Oh, my.
Came up through Charleston Atlantic Presbyterian back in the day, had many wonderful friends in Mount Pleasant, so welcome y'all. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have two questions for you, if
Yes,
you don't mind. And one is related to the question June asked to you earlier. I'm just wondering how you feel about what happened and how that will influence you going forward and how you will integrate that into your ministry. Just share some of your thoughts about it with me.
Sure, and I'm going to answer, and then I'm going to make sure I'm answering your question.
Sure.
and give you a chance to say, no, that's not what I was talking about at all, Clark. I think for me, particularly as I read the New Testament, I see the church from its very inception being involved in hard conversations, sometimes doing it better than others. And even at its beginning, some of those questions were not unrelated to the questions this presbytery is asking, questions about who is in and who is out and who has control and who has the power. And they're delicate questions that persist with the church. And the way I understand that is this is a reality of our human condition, and also a reality that God still chooses to work even in our systems when we are not all 100% going in the same direction. God still chooses to utilize even us to proclaim the gospel, to make known the Christian community and what it means to love one another even when it's hard. So in general, I think that conflict, when done well, can be a very healthy attribute of a congregation or a presbytery. And I think that is the primary challenge before us, is how do we continue to let conflict fuel us to new development, to new growth, to a future of committed partnership, and not let us divide us into camps where stones are thrown back and forth. And so that is my hope, is to enter into that process with full knowledge that I come with cultural baggage, I come with gender baggage, and yet I'm committed to God's promise that even through all of us, there is a capacity for God's Spirit to be at work and us to more faithfully and more fully live into a diverse Christian community that resembles the family of God. Has that gotten to your question, or do you want to?
That's perfect, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And the second question, my understanding of your job description is that you will staff, support, and train committee on ministry and committee on preparation for ministry. I don't see anything in your work experience directly related to that, and so maybe you could just speak to that a little bit.
Sure. And I think that's a very valid analysis. I don't have a deep background in executive roles within the church. So I think there's really a two-part answer. I think the first part is to say, I believe that I do have a strong aptitude for engaging and training and helping people deal well through the midst of conflict, and also administratively. I have had a lot of roles at larger churches that have required both political delicacy and also a nimbleness of administration. And so I think while I don't have a proven experience to point to, I do also have enough exposure that I feel confident in my ability to learn and grow into these roles alongside some really fine leaders. I have some fine mentors outside of this presbytery, and I think there's some fine mentors inside of this presbytery that'll help me get quickly up to speed in terms of the executive functions of this role. The other piece that I do want to put in there as well is I think one of the other thrusts of this position really is to focus on both pastoral care and network building, and not to be overly absorbed by just the administrative pieces, but to really be able to be a pastor, to be present within congregations and knowledgeable of the lives of the people in this community. And so those are things that I do feel like I have a strong background in and that I will bring to the table. And while this will definitely be a job for me to grow into, I feel that I have a good amount to offer right out of the gate and the aptitude to learn and grow into the other areas of this job. So,
Thank you.
absolutely. Thank you.
My name is Linda Stewart Kalin. I'm currently serving Colonial Heights Presbyterian Church on the Inner East Side in Portland, but I am speaking with the hat of also participating in a network within this presbytery that is the Presbyterian Urban Network. In the prayer call I had, I served in the South Coast Cluster, which was also a network of congregations. I'm disappointed that the position that we're calling you to is an advocate for congregations and clergy. People have heard me say before, clergy is not our word. It's not our polity. And I think that it doesn't fit the paradigm that we're moving into. Increasingly, leadership within the life of our presbytery has been consumed with the transitions of leadership in the lives of congregations. And very often where congregations stumble is waiting for the next, I will say, pastor, because it is one of our words, or minister of word and sacrament, to come and lead. We have increasingly struggled to develop and to sustain and to value broad-based leadership development in congregations. So among the 6 congregations in the Presbyterian Urban Network, currently, I probably am one of the few called installed pastors, and this year moved to, actually last year moved to half-time, and continue this year as a half-time pastor. I wish it said advocate for congregations and leadership. That's what I wish it said. An ACL is a terrible thing to have injured. And I think when we focus on clergy and pastors, even as advocates for them, we sometimes fail to live into the role of helping our presbytery live and do now what we can live and do now without the next pastor being there. So I would ask you, what kind of experience do you have in leadership development and dismantling the kind of hierarchy that says the pastor's going to come and tell us what to do? Because increasingly, our congregations are not being served by pastors, or minimally being served by pastors, and the pastors that are there fail at some level to help people capture the equal opportunity or the equal access to spiritual power that resides in all of us, which is our polity.
Yes.
So could you speak to a little bit to that side of things?
Yeah, and thank you, that is an excellent question. And I think you're very right to acknowledge with sobriety that our churches, many of them are not in a position where they can have full-time pastors or support them financially, or even part-time pastors. And so that is one of the challenges facing this presbytery. How do churches recognize that a pastor is very helpful in terms of leadership and in terms of organization of worship and all those other roles, important roles that pastors play, but churches aren't about the pastor. These are the churches of Jesus Christ. And these are churches drawn together by people with common belief and common commitment. And, the word liturgy means the work of the people. So even within our worship structure, there's an emphasis that it is the people's work to carry forth Christ's church in this world. And so I think that is a very valid and important question. I think a large part of it will be getting up to speed in terms of knowledge. I believe that relationships begin with knowledge. We must know one another, and so it is getting to know the congregations and the people that are present in the pews as to the best of my ability, and then also tapping into the knowledge of folks that are in this room, that folks that aren't in this room but had other things going on, folks that have loved this presbytery through the years, that have a much deeper knowledge of where the leaders are and what kind of support the leaders need. Getting to know those people, hear them, and then help coalesce them. Just like a church can't just hope that the pastor will be the one answer to all their woes and all their problems, I also will not be the one answer to this presbytery, or whoever might fill this role will not be the one answer that this presbytery needs to resolve those questions. I think it is a process of working to help people all see their shared responsibility to help carry the church forward. And I would long to partner with people that have expertise and that have knowledge of this presbytery to engage in that hard work of making sure ownership does reside within the congregations for their work, their life, and their ministry.
In the back.
Mark Olson, pastor, co-pastor at Lincoln City, Chapel by the Sea in Waldport. My question or my statement, one is that I guess this morning I hear a lot about new beginnings, new congregations, new ways of doing things, but having just served as a parish pastor with 3 congregations in Indiana in the Midwest, taking 3 congregations that felt like they were dying, and how can they survive? And what they were looking for was a fully ordained pastor, a couple of pastors. And Wendy and I actually, like you, had come to Portland hoping to find a call. And we were in the Presbytery for a year and a half. And at that time, in 2009, 2010, things just, the economy was tough. But we were called to go to Indiana, and there we found basically the sense of elderly congregations are absolutely new, in the sense of when your elderly dream dreams, when you as a pastor can help to enliven, to bring out that common sense of God's love, no matter how old you are. It's an amazing gift. You are going to be serving pastors in many different areas, from the urban area of Portland and ministries that are looking very new and different in some ways, to congregations on the coast where you have people that did not grow up there, and people that are coming that want to have liturgies that are like what they came from and knew and what they grew up with, and they want to sing from the old blue hymnal.
Maybe even the old red hymnal.
The red beige one, I don't know. But you know, you're going to be serving a lot of different congregations and a lot of different people, and I want to make sure that you've got somewhat that ability to have the ears to be able to listen to both your congregations and the pastors and all of these many different areas where you're going to be serving ranchers and farmers and beachcombers and Portlandiers. And you've got a big job, but I was wondering, can you give an example, as you as a pastor know, you probably have had a presbyter exec who was to be your pastor. Do you have an example or a model of what that person was and what attributes you would like to take on? Does that make sense?
Can you ask it just one more
Sure.
time, the question part? I'm almost with you, but
Do you
I want to make
have
sure.
an example of a pastor to you as a pastor?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, most definitely. That's a beautiful question. There's really one person that stands out tremendously in my life experience, who was a pastor at White Memorial Presbyterian Church in Raleigh, Art Ross. And I got a job right after college as a youth leader at White Memorial Presbyterian, and didn't really know what I was getting myself into. And Art really kind of took me by the hand and gave me quite a vision for ministry and quite a wake-up call to the seriousness and the complexity of ministry. But what I loved and appreciated so much about Art was his ability not only to really push me tremendously, but then also to show up as a true pastor for me. And that really culminated following my time serving as a youth leader. I went to Haiti and worked with a development project in Haiti, supervised by 2 Presbyterian missionaries, but that had me in a very remote, isolated area where I was the only English speaker for probably 5 miles, which doesn't seem like a lot until you're on foot, and then that's a fair piece. And so I'd found out about that role through a trip I'd taken with White Memorial. They had an ongoing mission partnerships in Haiti, and so Art actually came down with a group about 6 or 8 months into my experience there, and passed by and you know, we greeted them and said hello, and of course it was a great reunion there. But Art could see past the surface and see that I was deeply lonely and deeply struggling in a very harsh environment where I saw crushing poverty and heart-wrenching stories. And Art knew I needed some pastoral care. And so the rest of the group continued on to stay at a nice guest house, and Art committed to seeing what my life was like. And so he stayed in my little concrete slab house and used the latrine, and we broke apart my beds. We each had something to sleep on, and you know, and that was remarkable to me. Art was not a young man at the moment that he did this, and chose, and certainly didn't need to do this, but chose out of a deep commitment and love to actually experience the life I was leading and see how he could support and care for me in the midst of that. And that was really one of those moments that helped me get through a very challenging season and remember that as a rich season of growth and not merely one of discouragement at some of the overwhelming problems that face our world. So I hope that answers your question, but that he persists as one of the great examples of ministry to me. Certainly he's not a perfect person, and but he also understands what it is to come alongside and to walk in someone else's shoes and to work with them and to love them, and that continues to guide me. Thank you.
Up front.
Hi, Becky Strader, on the loose in Independence, Oregon. I'm very aware that it's becoming, even from my previous presbytery, that the watchword of many presbyteries these days needs to be, we've met the presbytery and it's us. That staff is not going to do that much work for us anymore. And so I'm sure that part of what you're expecting to do is to work with other folks to resource one another and care for one another, not to do that work for us. And I appreciate all that's been said, but as a pastor in a place not where I see other colleagues very often, and knowing that the role of pastor is agonizingly lonely, and I would be surprised if most pastors wouldn't agree with that. What are the models that you would have in mind I was pastor of a church that was Methodist and Presbyterian. The Methodists had a variety of ways of keeping their folks in touch, some more supportive than others. But it was very hard for me to break in because they already had their covenant groups. They already had, whatever. So what models would you see, especially when we are, in many cases, very spread out? There is the Portland metropolitan area, and then there's the rest of Oregon. And not that we don't care for one another, but we pretty much see each other at Presbytery or the occasional committee meeting. So what are the models that you would see for helping pastors to support one another, say, so that pastors have pastors? And I haven't seen a presbytery yet that's been able to pull it off, but I'm just wondering.
Sure. Yeah, no, thank you. I think that's a great, really at the heart of what this position will be about. And so I've started doing some thinking that I need to also bounce off of some of the other presbytery leadership and also some of the folks that have been invested in loving this presbytery and have a better knowledge than I do. At the same time, some of those ideas, certainly I know that there's already groups that this presbytery does foster for new folks coming into the presbytery. And right now that's, I think, solely a weekend. And then it just sort of drops off. I think that's a very natural, easy area to say, let's not leave this at just a weekend. Let's figure out how we can have a regular group that will continue to meet so that from the very moment you enter this presbytery, you have a committed group that will meet with you, that will pray with you, that will understand your context and hopefully mitigate some of that loneliness that I'm sure we have all experienced at times in our ministry. I think we need to continue to leverage more technology. I know that sometimes doesn't feel like I always feel like it's a little cold to sit down in front of a screen. At the same time, there can be rich conversation, and that can bridge miles and allow us to have deeper connection without having to drive for an hour, drive for 2 hours, drive for 6 hours to get to other clergy and to be more aware of what is going on in their congregations and in their lives. So I think those are some of the things. I'm not sure what kind of resources are available, but I would love, if there are resources available, to be able to help support regular clergy gatherings or church leadership gatherings even, because I hate to limit it to solely clergy unless that's a particular niche in need. But to be able to get groups of people together and pay for their dinners so they can be together sharing a meal, sharing stories of their life without necessarily a particular agenda or item that they have to accomplish beyond caring for and supporting one another. I think there's a lot of fertile soil there for ways to start to bridge those connections and to hear what is actually needed. I don't want to get in the catch where someone at the Presbytery is mandating, okay, you have to meet with these 4 people that you don't really like at this time and place. I don't think we benefit when there's not an organic element of it, but how can we foster and encourage those organic connections and get tools and resources so that people can be encouraged and even incentivized to have those meetings? Because I think it's been my experience whenever I do attend something with other clergy like that, it's tremendously encouraging and tremendously enriching and takes out a lot of the feelings of isolation or those pieces. So those are some of the early ideas I have, but I also know that that's something to be worked at and grown into with this position. So, thank you.
Zach?
I'm Zane Buxton, honorably retired, live in the wilds of Washington on the other side of the river. The offices belong to the church, and if you are in fact offered this office, do you agree that you will respond positively to all the ordination questions? And secondly, give us an example of 1 or 2 of them that are your favorites.
Oh, all right. Yes, I will agree positively to all of the ordination questions. I think they are beautiful questions. I particularly like that some of them are answered, I will with God's help, because I think so much of my experience in life and faith and ministry is offering the best I have to offer and recognizing that even that will fall short. And even our best efforts require God's grace and intervention to carry us forward and to make the ends meet that we cannot meet. So I like that aspect of the ordination questions. I remember, and I can't remember the full context, but I remember Roger Nishioka was speaking about some of the ordination vows that are taken by elders and ministers. And there's one that talks about serving with imagination. And he really, I don't know if you've heard Roger speak, he's a fabulous presenter, and he just had us all laughing, but about, we often don't think about imagination being a useful tool to us or even part of our ordination vows, but it is in there. Go back and thumb through and you will find that imagination is indeed something that we have all promised to engage with and to foster and to utilize. And that is, when the young men dream dreams and the old see visions, this is at the heart of imagination. How might the Christian story and God's activity in the world inspire us into new things? And so that's another one of the ordination vows I particularly like.
Sharon Hassenjaeger, ruling elder, Emmanuel West Lynn. And I think we've actually shaken hands at that church.
All right, thanks so much.
So your job, the job description for this position includes supporting pastors and advising and working with the COM and the CPM and the Congregations Connections Committee, which may or may not actually exist at this point. But I'm wondering, it seems to me that part of the current and future of the church is going to involve ministers who are tent makers. Do you have experience and exposure, knowledge about tent making that you could actually help people appreciate and implement?
That's a great question, and one of the peculiarities of the last church that my wife and I served was she was overemployed and I was somewhat underemployed, and so it was certainly not a true tent making arrangement, but I ended up getting a job as a kayak guide where I would give naturalist tours of the Charleston Harbor. And it was one of my great joys in life, really, was to get to take these kayak trips out. And so, and I bring that up because I think that it's easy to look with despair at churches that are saying we can't afford a clergy person and we can only afford a part-time or these pieces. And I found it so rich and rewarding to have something outside of the constructs of the church that tapped into other gifts and abilities that I had, tapped into other interests that I had, allowed me to be in the outdoors and present in nature and learning and observing. And it really enhanced my ministry at the church to sort of have this very different environment with, totally different stressors and concerns. And so I think that if we can be creative enough to envision how we can help our pastors have a livable income, because I long for folks to be able to live out their vocation and also provide for their families and not feel like they're taking on a life of poverty. And sorry, I guess I'm not answering your question.
No, I just want to know if you also see benefits for the congregation and that it's not just a compromise, but actually brings something of value to have somebody in the ministerial leadership who are also.
Yeah, I think it always brings things that when we remember we are full people, we are not just our jobs. And that is valid, whatever your job is, to be reminded you are a child of God first and foremost, and not solely whatever your vocation might be. I think there's real importance in that. I think the delicate balance is, it is so hard to find a part-time job that pays well and allows you to explore real interests and gifts, so that you can also have a part-time job in the church. It is, and then, as we all know, ministry is not a part-time job. It's not even a full-time job. It has demands that spill over and into nights and weekends, and it is a way of life. So it becomes very delicate. How do you protect a pastor so that they can serve a church well and also have enough of their free time to engage in other vocational pursuits and still have enough time to have some leisure and to be themselves and to stay grounded as a human being? Those are very challenging questions and important. But I think there is hope for those being positive gifts to the church, but also not ones we should lazily say, well, all we can do is provide just enough for this pastor to scrape by. So it's a give and take. I don't know if that's answered your question very well.
Mr. Moderator, John Berninger from First Church Roseburg. I'm always in awe of a math major. Anybody that can do that, it's got to be great. And an articulate one is even more impressive. Given that, I would move that we arrest the examination.
Okay, is there a second? All right, all in favor of arresting the examination, please say aye. All opposed, say no. Okay, the motion carries, and I would ask that someone from the ACCNC please escort Clark from the sanctuary here while we are able to make the motion and have some discussion without him present. I've just been delivered the vote, so the result of the vote is 49 votes yes, 4 votes no, and 1 abstaining, for a total of 54 voting. So Clark Schelara is elected as advocate for Congregations and Clergy. Will a member of the search committee go get Clark and bring him back in, please? Congratulations to Clark, and we thank the committee for their work. The next item is to dismiss the search committee. Second? All in favor of dismissing the committee with thanks, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. The motion carries, and the committee is dismissed. As we look forward to next steps, Clark begins his work on March 1st. We've talked about Hugh perhaps overlapping with him for a period of time. Do we know exactly how long that will be? Yes, Brian?
I know that Hugh originally made an offer for a month, but there's been conversations about whether there could even be some part-time, or whether that'll be too much. We have budget considerations as well. So at this point, it's just simply conversations about what might be helpful to have a good transition. But again, once we come up with a plan, we'll have to make sure the budget also supports that as well. So nothing's in cement yet.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. Sharon?
One more question. Does the COA make its decision about whether Clark also becomes a member of the Presbytery?
Already did.
Before the job was even, or was it
I can
conditioned upon this vote, I take it?
Brian will
Brian
speak to
Herron,
that.
Presbytery Revision and Mission. I could formally report from Hugh. Hugh was the facilitator for the COM meeting. They had 4 representatives from COM from the 4 different regions. There were 2 men and 2 women. There were 2 ruling elders and 2 ministers of Word and Sacrament. And they had a nice 2-hour meeting and conversation with Clark. And they voted to say that he is eligible for membership in the Presbytery and a good fit for the position. I guess I should have said that before the election.
Thank you. Yes. Zane?
I need to inform you that constitutionally, the Committee on Ministry cannot countermand the action of a presbytery to elect a staff member and make them a member of Presbytery. So we do not need COM action to authorize a staff member.
Okay. Thank you.
That motion wasn't to make him a member of Presbytery. You could have had somebody who would have been not a minister, and they wouldn't be a member of Presbytery.
Okay.
Mr. Moderator, are there plans to install Clark at our March meeting?
There are plans to install Clark at our regular meeting in March, correct? Yes.
I have a point of order kind of question. I don't want to see us get wrapped around the axle legally here. Was the motion, did it include having him received as a member of this presbytery? And if not, do we need to do that before we get out of here?
I would defer to our clerk to respond to that. Let's do it. Okay. Would you like to make that motion since you raised? Okay. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. Okay. I think if there are other detailed questions, you can probably ask those later. I don't know that we need to take presbytery time to do that. I've asked Clark to come up and close us, so he could probably say thanks or something too if he would like.
Mr. Moderator,
Yes.
can I just let people know that we have plenty of snacks if people want to grab a bite and say hello to Clark before they hit the road?
That'd be great. Yeah, back in the fellowship hall, there's food, and Clark will be there, and some of us will be there as well. Clark.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. It is with great gratitude and an overwhelming sense of just both joy and anticipation for what lies ahead, knowing that there will be challenges, but knowing that I'm committed to this process, and I'm so grateful for those of you who have come alongside to say that you will walk alongside me as well and help me grow into this role and serve faithfully as we live into what God might be doing next here in this presbytery. So I'm excited about the future, and I think, shall I adjourn with prayer for the...
Please. Please. Yeah. Oh, Paul has something else.
Paul Bells, Templeman, Candidate Clark. I do want to clarify, installation plans have not been set for the March meeting, perhaps the June meeting. We are still working on that. So,
okay.
We're not sure when that's going to happen.
Okay. So never mind about what I said earlier. It's in process. We're living into the new design. So yes, I have asked Clark to close us with a prayer, if he would do that.
Let's join together. Gracious and loving God, we come before you trusting that you are in our midst, that you hold our past, that you hold our present, that you hold our future. We ask that you continue to bless us with the good gifts of grace, of community, of love. Teach us to love and care for one another even better. Help us bridge divides that separate us. And help us to continue to represent your faithful community here in this presbytery. Help us to do that more fully and in ways that are faithful to you and the gospel of Jesus Christ, which knows no boundaries. Bless us, keep us, grant us safe travels. We ask all this in your Son's name. Amen.
This meeting is adjourned, and we will reconvene at our regular meeting on March 9th.